African-American teen sex trafficking victim is being sentenced to 5 years of closely supervised probation in the death of an Iowa man who raped and trafficked her. 17-year-old Piper Lewis is also being ordered to pay the family of Zachary Brooks $150,000. Now, Lewis was initially convicted of murder after stabbing Brooks to death in 2020. A judge deferred her prison sentence, which means if she violates her probation, Lewis could be sentenced to 20 years in prison. The judge in the case said he had no choice but to order Lewis to pay Brooks's family. Restitution is mandatory under Iowa law. This story is beyond sad. This is like punishing the victim. So this girl was 15 years old at the time. She ran away from abusive home life. She was sleeping in the hallways of apartments in the area, and this man, he took her in. And when he took her in, he began raping her and trafficking her to other men. And at one time or another, she just had enough, and she stabbed him to death. And so they actually prosecuted her, which should have been clear case of self-defense, and it should have been over at that time, but they ended up prosecuting her. So her sentence was suspended, as I said, but what ended up happening is that she still has to pay $150,000 restitution. So the good news in all of this is that she had a teacher, a former math teacher, who put out a GoFundMe page, and as of this morning, it had over $335,000 raised. The goal was $150,000, and so right now her lawyers are seeing if they can use that money to satisfy the GoFundMe. Because you know what, at the end of the day, you should never have to pay your rape victim's family for what they did to you. She was a child. Let's make no mistake about it. She was 15 years old. She was raped. She was trafficked. She was out in Iowa, having no choice but to do this, and one night she just had enough, and that should be the end of the case.
You know, I'm happy that you touched on the GoFundMe. That's actually what I have here, and I'm looking at it now, Mimi. So if this morning it was $330,000, right now it's at $387,000. The goal was only $200,000.
Okay.
And so I think that I read this morning that a judge has to decide if this GoFundMe money can even be used to pay for the restitution, which to me is, why does it matter if she has to pay $150,000? Why does it matter where the money came from? Clearly, there are 10,000 people who donated, 10,000 people, and this keeps on growing, who feels as if she should not have to pay that $150,000 alone. And I really like that her teacher did this. And one thing I want to say that was on here, her teacher noted that she did not have a violent history before or after this offense, which is very important. And then also, if she meets the conditions of her parole, she will have a felony removed from her record, because this is happening in the now. She's, I believe, 17 years old right now. What's going to happen 10 years from now when she wants to get a job, or 5 or 6 years ago from now when she wants to get a job? So I'm hoping that, one, she will be able to use the money that was garnered from her GoFundMe to pay for this restitution, and also this can be removed from her record, because not to say that violence is right, not to say that this man deserved to be killed, but also some would consider this self-defense.
It should have never happened. It should have never been brought to trial, right? They should have never went to court on this. The police officers doing the investigation should have said, okay, if this was a clear case of self-defense, it should have just never got here. And the bigger picture is we need to see and understand why Iowa state law requires you to have to pay a restitution to someone who raped you, right?
And what was crazier even, Mimi, was not that you have to pay a restitution of a certain amount. The restitution is $150,000. Like, I read that in Iowa, the restitution rate, if you will, is $150,000. So it's not like some people are going to pay $20,000 and some are going to pay $200,000. The restitution price is $150,000, which is kind of insane in 2022.
Exactly. So they should, if nothing else comes from this case, looking into why that is still on the books in Iowa should come from that.
I agree, 1,000%.